In this one, in module 3, we're going to start putting it all together. So this theoretical stuff we now understand about fatigue mechanisms, energy systems, how they work together and how they work separately. It's time to actually look at the practical side of things. So how do we actually, using that knowledge, how do we program for athletes so that they can not just do the most work possible and burn the most energy, but how can we actually train efficiently, get the most out of their training, and have that translate to improved performance in their sporting context. So sports specificity is actually really important when it comes to energy system development. There's no point training your basketballers like footballers, and there's no point training your volleyballers like tennis players. They do need to be just subtly little differences between our athletes, how we train them, what energy systems they're working on, their work-rest ratios, things like that. So I like to think of it in terms of a continuum. All your conditioning training is on this continuum in terms of maximum aerobic work at one end and then maximum power work at the other rather. So the continuum looks something like this, where at one end we've got strength and speed work. So strength and speed, while they're different qualities, they're really maximum ATP, PCR system type work. There's also a lot of neural and technical factors there as well. Next, you've got sprint intervals. So that's kind of an interaction between speed training and repeat sprint or interval or high intensity interval type training, but that kind of lives a little down the continuum. Next, our third stop is short intervals. So this would be a shorter rest period, short intervals, sort of 10, 20, maybe 30 meter type efforts. Under 10 seconds of work, really, we're looking at, maybe even under 20 seconds of work. Number 4, we're looking at long intervals. Now you'll notice there's a big gap there, and we'll fill that gap later on as we go through and expand on this stuff. But long intervals, we're now looking at sort of more your 200 meter, 400 meter efforts. So 25, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, even out to 120 seconds, maybe 2 minutes of work, could be considered a long interval. And we'll talk more about what defines and how we define these different types of intervals as well. And then our last stop on the conditioning continuum is obviously your aerobic continuous type work. So steady state, maintaining a pace and going at that for 3, 5, 10 minutes, hours, days, whatever it might be, depending on the context. Now with this continuum, it's important to realize that it's in that order that we work on things as well, and that we emphasize our training and our programming. So we work from number 1 and we work all the way down to number 5 in that order from a prioritization point of view and also from an emphasis point of view and where we spend our training dollars. So I think that's important to be across as well. It's a really simple way of thinking about it. It's like, well, tick those boxes in order from 1 through to 5, and I'll explain how that all just takes care of itself magically if you get things right as well. So let's start with speed and strength. We've talked about movement skill, we've talked about linear speed, agility, plyometrics, and strength and power training. And so all those units really combine here as we speak it now in terms of an energy systems point of view. So I love this quote here, another one. I love this quote from Mike Boyle. The last thing I'm going to be worried about is fitness, and the first thing I'm going to be worried about is fastness. This is particularly true when it comes to juniors. Coaches and athletes spend so much time worried about not being fit enough to run at a game and all these kind of factors, when the real thing they should be worried about is how fast they are, explosive they can change direction and sprint and move. It takes a long time to develop strength, power and speed, but conditioning can actually be developed relatively quickly. So spending more of your time putting more focus into developing explosive speed and strength and power is going to have flow-on effects that'll take care of your fitness for you. And we'll talk more about that in a bit as well. But worry more about fastness and explosiveness than you do about fitness. So many coaches see fitness issues, but they're actually just fastness issues being portrayed as fitness issues. So I'll unravel all of this as we go, but I think this is a good place to start. And so that brings up the idea of this strength reserve, but you could also think of it as the speed reserve as well, where athlete A is working at 85% of the maximum, while athlete B maintaining the same pace or the same output, but is only working at 70% of the maximum because they've got an extra gear they can give if they need it later. So this is great from an injury prevention point of view, but in this sense, it's really important from a fatigue resistance point of view as well. Athlete B could spend 3/4 of the game just cruising, and then last quarter scores a level, they kick into high gear, and that's when they take over. Or alternatively, they could work at 85% of max and they could blow by athlete A every opportunity they get. So it works nicely both directions.